So let's now continue with the news, and here are the headlines. Shubhanshu Shukla creates history, becomes the second Indian in space, embarks on historic Axiom 4 mission to the International Space Station.
What a ride! 40 साल बाद हम वापस अंतरिक्ष में पहुंच गए हैं और कमाल की राइड थी.
President Murmu and Prime Minister Modi laud Shubhanshu Shukla on this historic space milestone. The Union Cabinet adopts a resolution marking 50 years since the emergency, honours individuals who opposed the 1975 crackdown on democracy. NATO leaders convene at The Hague amidst tensions in West Asia, Russia-Ukraine conflict and global terror threats. Looks at 5% defence spending, ramping up of defence production.
This week on Defense Dynamics, a stealth mission shakes West Asia. The United States unleashes its B-2 spirit in the midnight strike or Iran's nuclear strongholds, a bold escalation in shadow warfare. We decode world's most powerful bunker busters, from the GBU-57 to weapons built to crack concrete and command centers. India looks at the skies with a bold vision of 6th-generation fighter jets while reinforcing its air defense with indigenous shields over S-400, the Iron Dome of the East. High-tech firepower, geopolitical moves and future warfare. On Defense Dynamics, 8 PM IST.
Journey, and Shukla will spend 2 weeks now aboard the International Space Station conducting science experiments, educational outreach and commercial research. And these were the first words from orbit spoken by the Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla shortly after the Axiom 4 mission successfully entered Earth's orbit.
नमस्कार मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों. What a ride! 40 साल बाद हम वापस अंतरिक्ष में पहुंच गए हैं और कमाल की राइड थी. और मेरे कंधे पे मेरे साथ मेरा तिरंगा है जो मुझे बता रहा है कि नहीं हूँ, मैं आप सबके साथ हूँ. ये मेरी इंटरनेशनल स्पेस स्टेशन तक की जर्नी की शुरुआत नहीं है, ये भारत के ह्यूमन स्पेस प्रोग्राम की शुरुआत है. और मैं चाहता हूँ कि आप सभी देशवासी इस यात्रा का हिस्सा बने. आपका भी सीना जैसे चौड़ा होना चाहिए, आप भी उतना ही एक्साइटमेंट दिखाइए. आइए हम सब मिलकर भारत की इस ह्यूमन स्पेस प्रोग्राम की जर्नी की शुरुआत करें. धन्यवाद. जय हिंद, जय भारत.
The parents of the Indian Air Force's Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla also celebrated as Axiom 4 mission lifted off from the NASA Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Overwhelmed with emotions, they were joined by teachers and students to watch the historic moment at his alma mater in Lucknow. President of India, Draupadi Murmu, has given a message on the successful feat of Axiom 4 mission. On social media X, she stated, and I quote, "As Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla creates a new milestone in space for India, the whole nation is excited and proud of an Indian's journey into the stars. He and his fellow astronauts of Axiom Mission 4 from US, Poland and Hungary prove the world is indeed one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. My best wishes for the success of this mission, which reflects the enduring partnership between NASA and ISRO. The wide-ranging experiments to be performed by the crew will lead to new frontiers of scientific studies and space exploration." Taking to X, Prime Minister Narendra Modi wished astronauts for the successful liftoff, and he said that, and I quote, "We welcome the successful launch of the space mission carrying astronauts from India, Hungary, Poland and the US. The Indian astronaut group captain Shubhanshu Shukla is on the way to become the first Indian to go to the International Space Station. He carries with him the wishes, hopes and aspirations of 1.4 billion Indians. Wish him and other astronauts all the success." Following the launch of Axiom 4 mission on Wednesday, the Union Minister of Science and Technology, Jitendra Singh, he hailed Shubhanshu Shukla's space feat, saying India is no longer a follower but an equal partner.
This is a moment where India has come of age. India is today a frontline nation, and it is, I would say, heralds the ascent of India to that pedestal of Viksit Bharat. So the ascent of India to the pedestal of rank 1 Viksit Bharat has started via space.
Union Minister Jitendra Singh further said, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, all this has happened.
This is truly vindication of the journey started by Vikram Sarabhai and Satish Dhawan, and it was destined to happen under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. And I am saying so not simply for saying, but out of evidence, because the space reforms which happened a couple of years ago have actually given a quantum leap to India's endeavors.
The NATO Summit Defence Industry Forum 2025 began in The Hague, a summit tailor-made for US President Donald Trump. The main goal of the European leaders is to get a fresh pledge from Trump to uphold the alliance's mutual defence obligations. The summit is also expected to endorse a higher defence spending goal of 5% of their GDP. World leaders have pledged support to Ukraine and voiced for a stronger Europe with stronger NATO. Secretary General Mark Rutte has said that the United States is totally committed to the alliance's mutual defence clause after President Trump appeared to cast a doubt on it.
President Trump, dear Donald, you made this change possible. Your leadership on this has already produced $1 trillion in extra spending from European allies since 2016. And the decisions today will produce trillions more for our common defense to make us stronger and fairer by equalizing spending between America and America's allies.
On the sidelines of the summit, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the US President Donald Trump are planning to meet today in The Hague. The two leaders have been central figures in recent summits. Now, Zelensky has not been invited to the main working session with the NATO members because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. Apart from the ceasefire, the discussions are expected to focus on Ukraine's purchase of a defense package, a large part of which consists of air defense systems. The leaders would also discuss more sanctions against Russia and a price cap on oil. And for more on all this, we are joined by DW correspondent Arthur Sullivan, who's live from Berlin. Arthur, thanks for being with us. This NATO meeting comes against the backdrop of conflict and now possible peace between Israel, Iran and the US. Has NATO itself had much to say on the situation there?
Well, yes, of course, the situation in the Middle East with regards to Iran and Israel is not directly a NATO issue. I mean, you've just mentioned the situation with the war in Ukraine and obviously other issues that they're preoccupied at the moment with. But nonetheless, the conflict here that has been taking place over the last 10 days or so does provide a considerable backdrop. There have been protests in The Hague ahead of the summit, mostly with an anti-war message and obviously focused on what's been happening in Iran. But NATO and its Secretary General Mark Rutte have not really addressed the issue too forcefully ahead of this. The big comment that Rutte made in advance of this summit about it was that he said the US attacks did not violate international law, the US attacks on Iran in recent days. And then yesterday there was quite a remarkable text message that Rutte had sent to Donald Trump, which Trump published and which NATO verified was indeed true, where the NATO leader praised the, quote, truly extraordinary and, quote, decisive action from the US, saying that it made us all safer, end quote. So going by that, at least it doesn't look like there would be much dissent, if any, from within NATO regarding what has been happening in the Middle East in the last few days.
Arthur, NATO wants the member states to agree to raise defense spending to 3.5% of GDP with an extra 1.5% of GDP on security-rated infrastructure. Can it be agreed upon?
Yeah, well, that is the big issue. I mean, it's been a constant topic of Trump's since his very first term as president, and he is now obviously getting certain credit for the fact that NATO members have largely increased spending significantly. For years, that target was 2%, and for years, most of the countries failed to meet it. Now, all but 10 of the 32 members do indeed meet it. Now, of this new figure that they want to agree, that you've just mentioned, that 5%, 3.5% in defence, an extra 1.5% of GDP on defence-related infrastructure. The suggestion is that NATO has reached an agreement on it. I have seen a text that is reportedly the one they're going to release later, which seems to suggest that there is agreement. But there is one country that has been sort of holding out, and that's Spain. Spain currently doesn't meet the 2% threshold, and its leader, Pedro Sanchez, who is one of the few left-wing leaders in Europe, he has said that he doesn't think it's right to spend this kind of money on defence, that it would affect social spending in the country, it would affect their plans for the green transition. Now, the big question that we're going to find out as soon as this summit ends is what kind of opt-out, if any, has a country like Spain found? Because some leaders have said just right this morning, in the last hour or so, there will be no opt-outs from the final text, that you either agree to the 5% or you don't, and if you don't, well, then there isn't consensus. So it's interesting to see how Spain could possibly say that it's going to meet its commitments without spending this 5%. And I guess the worry in advance of this summit has been that if Spain were to achieve special status, other countries who perhaps currently also don't spend the 2%, then they may also say, well, we also want a special deal. And of course, that's not something that's likely to please President Trump, who, as we've seen in advance of this, NATO seems to be doing everything in its power not to upset him, not to offend him, to give him as much credit as possible, and to essentially butter him up to avoid any big confrontation at this summit.
Indeed, and for several years now, there have been existential questions about NATO's future, mostly regarding the US's role under President Trump. Can this meeting shore things up?
Well, certainly President Trump's views have dominated the NATO narrative for the guts of 10 years now. I mean, even when he wasn't president, the alliance was still essentially acting in a way that was probably in anticipation of his return to the White House. That's for good reasons. You know, the US is clearly by a mile NATO's most powerful member. Now, one very simple example of how this is his behaviour influences NATO so much. This summit has been made smaller to avoid the possibility of Trump walking out early, as he did from a G7 meeting just last week. So normally this would be a 3-day summit with several large meetings. Now it's just one big meeting between the leaders for 2.5 hours, which is happening right now. So that's one of the big reasons. Now, another big concern here, not just around the defence spending issue, has been this question of the US commitment. So on his flight to The Hague, Trump gave an interview to reporters and he said, regarding the famous Article 5 of NATO, that's the article that says one attack on a member of NATO is an attack on all members. Trump said he had numerous definitions of this and that he would give his definition when he arrived in the Netherlands. But then on arrival in the Netherlands, at a press conference with Mark Rutte, Trump said that he was with NATO all the way, that there was no question whatsoever of his commitment. So then maybe there's perhaps another example of how Rutte's strategy of pleasing and flattering the US president is working. Now, I think the bottom line here is that I don't think any European leader, any NATO leader outside of the US is naive enough at this stage to think that Trump's behaviour on this topic is predictable. For months now, for years now, European leaders have been saying we can no longer rely on the US in the way we used to when it comes to defence. The transatlantic partnership is not the same. Under Trump, the US has consistently shown itself to be unpredictable on these questions. That example I just gave about what he said pre and before the flight shows that. And I don't think anything that happens at this meeting is going to change that fundamental reality.
Arthur Sullivan in Berlin, DW correspondent. Thanks for being with us. Still to come on this edition of DD India. Iran suspends its cooperation with the IAEA, claiming that Iran's nuclear program would proceed at a faster pace.
This week on Defense Dynamics, a stealth mission shakes West Asia. The United States unleashes its B-2 spirit in the midnight strike on Iran's nuclear strongholds, a bold escalation in shadow warfare. We decode World's most powerful bunker busters, from the GBU-57 to weapons built to crack concrete and command centers. India looks at the skies with a bold vision of 6th-generation fighter jets while reinforcing its air defense with indigenous shields over S-400, the Iron Dome of the East. High-tech firepower, geopolitical moves and future warfare. On Defense Dynamics, 8 PM IST, only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Now, Iran's parliament has voted to suspend the cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, claiming that Iran's nuclear program would proceed at a faster pace as a result. Now, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf, he has said that the country has approved a bill, and this is to suspend the cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog. Kalibaf says that the IAEA had refused to even appear to condemn the attack on Iran's nuclear facilities and has undermined its international credibility.
Despite the recent attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities, the International Atomic Energy Agency has not condemned them, not even superficially. It has undermined its international credibility, and for this reason, the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran is suspending its cooperation with the agency until the security of its nuclear facilities is guaranteed and Iran's peaceful nuclear program will proceed at a faster pace.
Meanwhile, the UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi has called his top priority, he says it's his top priority, to get back the inspectors into Iran. The IAEA has yet to assess the impact of US and Israeli military strikes and to verify its stocks of enriched uranium. Iran submitted a letter to the UN nuclear body on June 13, affirming that it would take special measures to protect its nuclear materials and equipment without details. Grossi believes much of that material had survived the attacks.
This is number one priority, like you say. We know that, I had received a letter from the Iranian foreign minister saying that they had taken protective measures already. They did not get into details into what that meant, but clearly that was the implicit meaning of that. So we can imagine that this material is there.
The Israeli Army spokesperson, Brigadier General F.V. Defrin, said that one of the key achievements of the operation was the damage inflicted on Iran's regional proxy network.
One of our biggest achievements in this operation is the damage inflicted to the proxy network around us. They spent years building a ring of fire around Israel. They armed and funded Hezbollah, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and many more. We see their inactivity during this operation and we are monitoring their activity and we are ready.
US President Donald Trump spoke about the Iran-Israel conflict at NATO, and he said that this is the victory for the world.
They knew we were coming. When they know we're coming, they're not going to be down in that, 30 stories underground. So, no, I think it was just a tremendous victory for everybody, including Iran. Look, they've got a country, and they've got oil, and they're very smart people, and they can come back. Israel got hit very hard, especially the last couple of days. Israel was hit really hard. Those ballistic missiles, boy, they took out a lot of buildings. And they've been great. Bibi Netanyahu should be very proud of himself. And they've really been great.
Airlines resume flights to and from Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport in the wake of a ceasefire with Iran on Wednesday. Israel's airspace has largely been closed for nearly 2 weeks. Israel's military lifted restrictions on activity across the country on Tuesday evening, 12 days during which Israel and Iran traded air attacks. Israeli airports authorities said It was in contact with airlines to try and accelerate return capacity. Departure flights were also in operation, and foreign nationals stranded in Israel were able to leave the country. India's Operation Sindhu also continues in full swing. The Minister of State, Shobha Karandarjale, has received today 224 Indian nationals who returned to India from Israel on an IAF, an Indian Air Force aircraft, at 10:30 a.m. The government has said safety and security of Indian nationals remain their top priority. Till date, 818 Indian nationals have returned home from Israel as part of Operation Sindhu.
ऑपरेशन सिंधु के तहत इसराइल से 224 लोगों को, भारतीयों को हम स्वागत किया है। 7 घंटा प्रवास करके वो आए हैं, बट खुश है। मैंने उसको पूछा अपना अपना घर जल्दी जाइए, उन्होंने बोला घर पहुंचे हैं हम, दिल्ली हमारा घर है, हमारा देश, हमारा वतन, हम पहुंचे हैं।
The European shares have nudged higher on Wednesday as investors viewed the ceasefire between Israel and Iran as a sign of de-escalating tensions. The pan-European Stoxx 600 index advanced 0.2% at 542.12 points on Wednesday. European auto stocks led the sectoral gains with a 1.2% rise, while defense stocks gained 0.9%. On the flip side, media shares fell 0.6%. Investors will also await U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's testimony before the Senate on Wednesday. Let's take a look at some other news now. Glastonbury, the world's largest greenfield music festival, opened its gates on Wednesday to around 200,000 ticket holders who will see programs ranging from Olivia Rodrigo to Rod Stewart. The festival will take one of its periodical fallow years in 2026 to reduce the environmental impact on the dairy farm. British Royal Navy frigate HMS Richmond docked in Jakarta on Wednesday as part of the UK's efforts to strengthen defence ties with Indonesia amid growing maritime security concerns in the Indo-Pacific region. The visit, attended by British Ambassador Dominic Jeremy, comes days after another British vessel, HMS Spey, sailed through the Taiwan Strait. In Vietnam, a nearly 4,000-ton offshore wind power substation has been successfully launched by Bao Tin Logistics using a self-propelled hydraulic platform system. This marks a significant milestone for Vietnam, as this is the first time when a super heavy offshore substation component has been fully transported and launched by a domestic company. Over 150 hydraulic axles and a team of skilled Vietnamese engineers and workers were mobilized for the operation. The Union Cabinet on Wednesday passed a resolution condemning 50 years of the imposition of the emergency. The Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav said that the Cabinet at its meeting, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, observed a 2-minute silence as a tribute to the victims of the incident.
The Union Cabinet, chaired by Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, resolved to commemorate and honor the sacrifices of countless individuals who valiantly resisted the emergency and its attempt at subversion of the spirit of Indian Constitution. A subversion which began in 1974 with a heavy-handed attempt at crushing the Navnirman Andolan and Sampoorn Kranti Abhiyan. To mark the occasion, a 2-minute silence was observed in today's meeting of the Union Cabinet as a tribute to those whose constitutionally guaranteed democratic rights were taken away.
The Cabinet also lauded the successful launch of Axiom 4 mission carrying Indian astronaut Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla.
We welcome the successful launch of the space mission carrying astronauts from India, Hungary, Poland and the US. The Indian astronaut Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla is on the way to become the first Indian to go to International Space Station. He carries with him the wishes, hopes and aspirations of 1.4 billion Indians. The cabinet wishes him and other astronauts all the success.
In a major boost to India's space ambitions, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited will take full commercial control of small satellite launch vehicles within 2 years, a first for any public sector unit. The move comes under a landmark tech transfer from ISRO facilitated by InSpace. Now, with over 300 startups fueling India's rapidly growing space sector, InSpace chairman Dr. Pavan Goenka told DD India's Tapas Bhattacharya that India aims to be among the top 3 space economies soon. He also lauded astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla on his mission to the International Space Station.
Joining me is Padma Shri Dr. Pavan Goenka to talk about the SLV program that has just been given to HAL. So that's a huge milestone for India and India's space sector. You guys played a pivotal role, InSpace played a pivotal role in that. How this SSLV is expected to be a game changer for India's space sector, sir?
Well, see, SSLV is a small satellite launch vehicle, right? And India is aiming to become the global hub for all the small satellite launches. SSLV is a proven, robust rocket coming from ISRO with years of experience that ISRO has put into this. And therefore, that full design going to an industry, a company, would really expedite the commercialization of the small launch vehicle. In addition to SSLV, we have 2 more private sector rockets, one from Skyroot, one from Agnikul, and we are creating a launch center just for small launches at Kulchakapatnam in Tamil Nadu. So if you put the whole thing together, I think India's aim to become the global hub for small satellite launches, this is a major step towards that.
So also we have seen in the last few years, especially the space economy has grown manifold. When once you started also, we've seen from nothing to now we are probably in the top 5 in the space economy sector.
I'm sure that very soon we will become amongst the top 3 countries in the world. It will take us 8 to 10 years to get there, but that's our vision, that's our plan.
How many startups right now are working with you people, sir?
About 300. There are 300 startups in India, which the number was only about 30-40 3 years ago. So all of them have come up in the last 3 years.
Also, any big plan when it comes to pushing the satellite from the private sector companies?
Yes, of course. We have a very large project for Earth observation constellation. That will be the last date for the bid is next week. And again, that will go to another company, private sector company. And that will be a major project in terms of overall investment, maybe even bigger than SSLV project, where the private sector will invest as much as 12 to 1,500 crores.
First Indian after 4 decades going up in space. What's your take?
I think first time in 40 years that an Indian person is going in space. So that's a very big moment for us, and it's a precursor to the human space flight of India.
Much appreciated time. So that was Pavan Goenka stating that India's space technology and economy is going up by leaps and bounds, and in the next few years it's going to be many more launches and much more technology coming in the sector. With Campus and Monty, this is Tapas Bhattacharya for GD India from Delhi.
The emergency of June 1975 is regarded as one of the darkest periods in India's democratic history, marked by constitutional changes, loss of fundamental rights, suppression of personal freedoms and press censorship. Forced sterilizations also and widespread repression left lasting scars on the nation's collective memory. Here's the report.
The emergency declared on the night of June 25-26 in 1975 is remembered as a dark chapter in Indian democracy. The constitution was misused to suppress dissent, and efforts were made to reshape it to enable authoritarian rule. Citizens were stripped of their fundamental rights, freedom of speech was denied, and the press was censored. The public had access only to the information that Indira Gandhi's government approved and allowed to be published. All dissenting leaders, along with activists, journalists, and academicians who raised their voices against the emergency, were arrested. The harshness of the period continues to serve as a grim reminder of the events that unfolded. Following the declaration of emergency, the government arrested key opposition leaders under laws like under Maintenance of Internal Security Act, Defense of Indian Rules. Prominent figures including Morarji Desai, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Lal Krishna Advani, George Fernandez, Jayaprakash Narayan, and even Congress leader Chandrasekhar were jailed and held at undisclosed locations. A law was enacted denying arrested individuals the right to court hearings or bail. Their families and associates were kept uninformed. Visits were heavily monitored by intelligence officials, and the communication was censored too. At the onset of emergency, Articles 14, 21, and 22 of the Constitution were suspended. This move took away the guarantees of equality before the law, protection of life and property, and the right to be presented before a court within 24 hours of arrest. In January 1976, Article 19 was also suspended, revoking freedom of speech, publication, association, and assembly. With the emergency, strict censorship was clamped down on newspapers and new laws were introduced. All four major news agencies, PTI, UNI, Hindustan Samachar, and Samachar Bharati, were merged into a single news agency, and a press code of conduct was introduced. Editors were arrested for dissent. The film Kissa Kursi Ka was seized, singer Kishore Kumar was blacklisted, and the film Andhi was also banned. During the emergency, police brutality and repression were widespread, with detainees facing inhuman treatment. Even the lawyers and judges were targeted. A notorious aspect of emergency was the forced involvement of teachers and low level staff in implementing family planning measures. Forced sterilizations and oppressive measures, disguised as family planning and beautification, led to widespread abuse of government power and severe hardship for ordinary people. In the 1971 elections, Indira Gandhi defeated Raj Narayan from the Rai Bareli seat, who later challenged her victory, citing misuse of government resources. In 1975, the Allahabad High Court invalidated her election and barred her from contesting elections for next 6 years. The Supreme Court upheld this but allowed her to remain the Prime Minister, attend Lok Sabha sessions, though without voting rights. Facing widespread public anger over unemployment, inflation, and corruption, and with the opposition demanding a resignation, Indira Gandhi's position was further weakened by the Allahabad High Court verdict of continuing as Prime Minister. To cling to power, she imposed the emergency, marking a dark chapter in Indian democracy. The emergency, which began at midnight on June 25, lasted until March 21, 1977. This 21-month long period was a dictatorial phase in India's democratic history that deeply affected the lives of ordinary citizens. However, the decision to impose the emergency proved disastrous for the Congress party. In 1977, the elections that followed, Congress faced a major defeat, and for the first time, a non-Congress government led by Morarji Desai came to power. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, as we told you, today marks 50 years since one of the darkest chapters in India's democratic history, the imposition of the emergency. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in a tweet on social media platform X, he said, and I quote, "The people of India mark this day as Samvidhan Hatya Diwas. On this day, the values enshrined in the Indian Constitution were set aside, fundamental rights were suspended, press freedom was extinguished, and several political leaders, social workers, students and ordinary citizens were jailed. It was as if the Congress government in power at the time placed democracy under arrest," unquote. The External Affairs Minister, Jaishankar, has also recalled the painful chapter of independent India's history on Samvidhan Hatya Diwas. In a tweet, he said, and I quote, "Institutions were undermined, rights were suspended, and accountability was set aside. It also remains a powerful reminder of our collective duty to safeguard constitutional values and uphold the resilience of India's democracy." Thousands gathered at Cusco's major archaeological site. This is to witness the Inti Raimi festival, which is a reenactment celebrating the Inca tradition of paying homage to the sun god Intni. That's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, get the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code and download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lynn from all of us here in Delhi. Thank you for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.